Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Providend's Money Wisdom Podcast. I'm your host, Isaac, client advisor at Providend. In today's episode, we will be discussing about succession planning, more specifically, how SME business owners can enhance and capture the value of their business to ensure that they achieve both their life goals and their financial goals. Join with me today is Jerome Song, who is the Associate Director of Business Exit at Providend. Hi Jerome, it's great to see you today.
Hi Isaac.
So Jerome is an experienced business advisor with many years of corporate management and advisory experience. He assists business owners with vision alignment, team development, organizational transformation, business valuations, and exit strategies. Okay, Jerome, let's dive right into today's topic. What is succession planning and why is it important for businesses?
Well, Isaac, in a nutshell, it is about making sure that the business doesn't skip a beat when the owner decides to retire or decide to move on to new ventures or just taking a back seat to take a rest and making sure that things are continuing to run. And also the second part, it is about grooming someone or a team to make sure that in such situations, someone will be able to step up and continue to run the company. So it is important because one, it ensures a continuity, just like a well-oiled machine. Even if the owner is not around, things function. All right, and it's just like passing the baton in a relay race. No one slows down. Things continue to run. Two is about stability, making sure that the employees, the customers, and the partners are assured that things are happening as per what it was before. Three is about protecting the business value, making sure that we have capable leaders that will continue to drive the growth and the success of the firm. And four, it is about mitigating the risk, reducing the risk that there will be a leadership gap that will lead to operational challenges or a loss of market position.
Right. Thanks, Jerome, for sharing. So, what does a well-implemented succession plan look like then?
A well-implemented succession plan will look like this. One is that to have a well-defined vision and objectives, to be very clear about the long-term goals and objectives, and to have the succession plan being aligned to this. Now, the plan would involve identifying, how would the future leader looks like, and what are the competencies required to.
Okay, Jerome, I'm sure this easier said than done, right? I mean, you shared about what well-implemented succession plan look like, but I'm sure that there are certain challenges that SME business owners face when it comes to succession planning. So could you share some of these with our listeners?
Yeah, definitely. I think no one goes through the hard work, taking the risks and sacrificing without hoping that the company continues. And building value is the dream of all entrepreneurs. But the fact is that everyone works very hard, but sometimes they overlook the importance of planning for this succession planning, someone to take over eventually. Now, the challenges are, one is, of course, retaining employees. Imagine you're working for a company for a very long time and you know that the boss is going to, retire. There will be a lot of anxiety and uncertainty, unrest. And I think it is important to make sure that we keep everyone calm and committed and moving in the same direction. That's one. Two, it is about identifying the successor, and there's a whole process that we need to take them through to assess their competencies. What is the competencies required for these roles? Do they have that? How do we build on these competencies to get them ready to take on this succession?
So you mentioned about retaining valuable employees, right? And I think it's a common challenge when it comes to businesses, especially during succession planning. How do they keep their top talents, in terms of, like what you mentioned, right? They know that the boss is retiring. Perhaps this boss is a very charismatic boss. There's a lot of uncertainty. And also at the same time, because due to job uncertainty, they might start looking elsewhere first, just in case and all that. So, how can business ensure that their top talent stays during this period of succession planning?
Retaining valuable employees can be challenging, but there are a couple steps that we can do. And of course, the very important one is to keep an open communication channel, to be transparent in our communication. It is about keeping employees informed about this succession plan, what it entails, and what is it involved, so that it reduces the anxiety and to have that clarity of what's ahead of them.
Right. So to that point, will it make sense for? There's two schools of thoughts here, right? Yeah. So one is you keep it a secret from your employer. Yeah. From your employees that you are thinking of, doing this succession planning. Or the other is like you mentioned that it should be communicated. I will assume once you're very sure that you are embarking on this succession planning, straight away to the employees, right? So what do you think about these two different methods of approaching succession planning?
Well, that's true. There are these two schools of thoughts, but I think the employees are aware, that, for example, if the business owner is getting on in age, or it could be a situation where the business owner is health condition may not be so good, then I think this will be the top questions on everyone's mind. And if we keep it hush-hush and they start to see, strange people coming in and out of the office, they will start, figuring out that, hey, something is happening. So rather than that causing a lot of anxiety and uncertainty and leading on to when people start to look for jobs, I think it is better for them to have an open and transparent communication, and to be very factual about it. This is what's going to happen, and we are working with you, getting their involvement into, mapping out these succession plans and executing these succession plans, and they actually have an involvement and say in certain areas. I think it will provide that continuity and stability that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, better than letting them mindlessly speculate, and at the same time they don't dare to raise it up to their supervisors or to the boss, right? So I think you're right. I think it's best to have be very open and honest about it. And if they have any concerns, if they have any doubts, at least management can reassure them. That's and right. Perhaps that could be the difference between whether top talents stay or leave during succession planning. Right. Just now you mentioned that also something about finding and preparing a successor, right? So what are some challenges when it comes to that? I know some businesses, it's quite straightforward. They just pass it to their descendant, right? And okay, this is my son, you take over. But what are some challenges in this?
Well, I think for a start, the children may not want to take over. That's one. And two is about identifying the right person for the job. And it's tricky trying to balance between skills, experience, and leadership. We need to suss out some of these competencies, whether is this the right person for the job. Two, it is also whether this person is a culture, can fit in with the culture of the company. Whilst the person may be technically strong, this person may not be the right person to be able to lead the team. That's number two. The third is, it may be someone internally that we can groom, or it can be someone that we find from external. Someone internal, they may be, very familiar with the culture. They are part of the company for a very long time, but sometimes they lack the fresh perspective. But if it's someone external, they may bring in the fresh perspective, a different set of skills and experience. But the challenge is sometimes they may not be able to build up a good rapport with the team.
Yeah, this sounds very challenging, right? So it's kind of like a situation where
that's right.
If you do it this way, there's certain strengths and weaknesses. You do it the other way, there's also certain strengths and weaknesses. So, so let's say you found a successor, right? Whether it's internally or externally, you found a successor. So what about preparing this successor, right? I assume if it's someone found internally, the preparation work would probably be easier. But what do you think about that?
Well, regardless of whether this person is found internally or hired from external, the key thing is to identify what are the competencies required for this role, yeah, and whether this person has that competencies or not. And with that, then we can map out a very structured development process for us to identify what are some of these skills gaps and experience that we need to equip them with. Now, structured development program is not just about training, but it also involves mentorship and life experiences to be shared from the outgoing owner manager, and it is about looking at what are some of these critical knowledge and experience that may not have been documented, and that's why it also involves a mentorship program that we need to design as part of that structured development.
Thanks for sharing. So everything between finding a right successor, preparing the successor, retaining the top talents in your company, it seems like it's quite easy to have poor succession planning, right? So could you give our listeners an example of a firm that has poor succession planning and how it jeopardizes its business?
So imagine we have a company that is has been doing light manufacturing in Singapore for the past 30 years. Now, the owner is very involved in the business and he has been running the business for a very long time. And there was no succession planning. His children are not so interested in taking over this business. They are all professionals in their own right. But the challenge comes when the owner, due to a health scare, he have to scale back and he couldn't find somebody within the firm to take over the running of the business. So naturally, because of his health condition, he couldn't spend as much time as he used to do or would want to. And that naturally leads to operational challenges and a loss of market position. Internally, because of the lack of clear direction, there are a lot of internal conflicts. The managers are sometimes fighting amongst themselves. There's no clear direction. So these are some of the challenges that SME businesses will encounter if they don't put in these plans early enough.
Yeah, so there's always this saying that businesses cannot last more than 3 generations. Of course, that's just a saying, but perhaps there's a bit of truth in that. And one reason could be because of poor succession planning.
Right. Careful planning, early planning is definitely important.
Yeah. Hi listener, we hope you're enjoying this episode and podcast series so far. At Providend, we have been sharing our thought leadership content through various mediums beyond just this podcast. If you're interested in knowing more, check out the link in the show note to subscribe to our newsletter today. Thank you, and let's get back to the episode. Okay, thanks for sharing that example. I mean, based on what you shared, it's actually quite difficult for a business owner to do it themselves, right? But more specifically, why can't they do it themselves? I mean, you shared all these tips for our listeners who are business owners, and why can't they apply it themselves? Why is it so difficult for them to do it themselves?
Well, first is the business owner may not be familiar with this side of things. They are expert in their own area of expertise. This is something that they are not familiar with. Identifying successors, coming up with a development plan, identifying what are the competencies required for this role, coming up with a structured development program. These are things that they are not familiar with. So lack of expertise is one. lack of time and resources. They don't have a team to deal with this sort of things. They don't have the tools. They have 1,000,001 things to do. So that's the last thing on their mind. So lack of time and resources. And let's not forget about the emotional side of things, because the business is their baby, their blood, sweat, and tears. Now, it is difficult sometimes for the business owner to decide who to take over, who should be on the management team. And that's why sometimes it is good to get an outsider's perspective and without the emotional attachment, to help them see from a different light of who that potential successor should be and why.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like a huge challenge for SME business owners. I mean, like you mentioned, they have 1,000,000 things to do, and in terms of their business as usual stuff, right? They still have to run the business, but at the same time, even if they have the time, they might not have the mind space, right? Even if they are not like bogged down by back-to-back meetings, but they still have to think about the daily operations of the business, and also you mentioned about the resources. So how can Providend come in that case, right? How can Providend help them and add value in their business succession endeavor?
Well, where we can come in is to help make the whole process a lot smoother. And what we can do is to do an evaluation of this successor. So it's a bit like talent scouting for your business, right? We help you to identify who is the right candidate, whether is it internally or externally. Now, how we do that is by using well-established frameworks. We help to identify, what are the competencies required for a certain key roles, and to ensure that the candidates that we are looking at has these competencies or can be groomed to take on these roles with training and mentoring and coaching for them. That's one. Two is about creating this structured development process where we work with the business owner to map out a timeline and to have this training and mentoring and coaching to get them to where they need to go in a certain time frame, so that we have a smooth transition to help them. So we take care of all this at the back end for the business owner, so that they can focus on the running of the day-to-day operations and the strategic planning.
Right. So at the end of a process, we'll come up with a report of some sorts, and you'll say, okay, these are who we think is have potential to be a good business successor, and of course we also have planned some training programs that will be recommended for each candidate.
That's right.
Am I right to assume that?
That's right. And we work very closely with the business owners because they have been in this trade for a very long time. They know best what is required in terms of the technical skills, the experience to do what he or she used to do. But I think there's also the softer element side where we identify suss out candidates that can be better fit for the team in terms of the culture side of things.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to ask you a tough question, right? So let's say you make a recommendation, then the business owner, perhaps because of nepotism or what, he prefers his son. I prefer his son to take over the business. Then maybe he disagree with your recommendation. So how do we usually approach this kind of situation?
Well, I'm pretty sure there are situations where the business owner would prefer his son to take over the business, and I think it's a fair ask because this is their blood, sweat, and tears, and they hope for someone to carry on that legacy from within the family. But it's also important to help them see from a different angle to get a clearer perspective of what are some of the skill set or the competency gap that the son may have, and to be very clear that there's this gap, and what are some of the things that we need to put in place if the business owner wants to let the son take over eventually.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I mean, the son might not be number one candidate, but as long as with a structured framework of training and mentoring, he has a chance. So at least put him through that first before final decision is made.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, so could you give an example then of a successful business succession plan, right? So everything is smooth, when the ownership or the running of the business is transferred to the successor.
Well, I can think of two. Let's start off with the first one, local example, a well-known bakery chain, Bengawan Solo. Their founder, Madam Anastasia, she has been grooming her son, Henry, to take over for a very long time. And the son is very involved in the day-to-day operations, working very closely with the mother. And I'm pretty sure when the time comes for her to take a back seat, the son is all ready to run, take over the business. Two would be a global example would be Apple, because the current CEO, Tim Cook, took over from Steve Jobs in 2011, but that didn't happen overnight. It took many years of preparing him for this role. So whether is it financial performance, whether is it product expansion, whether is it global market presence, reach, we can see that the current CEO, Tim Cook, has really lived up to the expectations that Steve Jobs had when he appointed him as his successor, because clearly the efforts have paid off with their succession planning.
I can see a very distinct similarity between both of them is that firstly the successor is very clearly identified, and there's a period of time where he can be groomed and be part of the business and know the business well, and perhaps even build rapport with the key employees in the company.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Jerome, let's wrap up with a few key takeaways that you'd like our listeners to know about succession planning.
Well, succession planning is not easy in the first place. We talk about that because SME business owners really lack the time and resources and the expertise to do that. But if you want the business to thrive after they leave the business, then really it is about that careful planning that needs to start early. So if I say one key takeaway, it is really about starting early. You really need to start planning now and to seek help if you need to, because it's not an easy process, and it's better to leave it to people that are experts in this area to take you through this whole process.
Right. Okay, thank you so much, Jerome. And that's all the time we have today. So, Jerome, it's been a pleasure having you on.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to all our listeners, I hope you enjoyed our episode on business succession planning. If you like this episode, please follow and subscribe to our podcast if you have not done so already. As always, thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next episode. All analysis, views or opinions from interviews, recommendations and other information broadcasted, podcasted or published herein are provided for general information purposes only. Information expressed does not take into account any specific situation, particular needs or objectives, and should not be construed as specific advice or a recommendation. Information has been obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal or tax professional before taking any action. Providend Limited does not accept any liability for any loss whatsoever arising from any use of the information broadcasted or published herein. All contents and information contained herein may not be copied or reproduced in whole or in part by any means without prior written consent of Providend Limited.